The massive space station hung in the darkness like a metal flower. Its lights twinkled against the black void while the planet Kepler 442b spun slowly beneath it. Inside the station, hundreds of young beings from dozens of worlds walked through, the halls of the Galactic Naval Academy. Lisa Martinez sat at the back corner of the classroom, her dark eyes watching everything but saying nothing. Around her, alien cadets filled the air with noise. The Krek students hissed at each other in their native tongue, their scales catching the light. The Zephyrians chimed like broken glass when they laughed. The Vrak clicked their mandibles together in rapid conversations that sounded like typing machines. Martinez, called Instructor Ven, a tall blue-skinned Altarian. What do you think about the tactical scenario we just discussed? Lisa looked up slowly. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. The flanking maneuver would work if the enemy doesn't expect it. Some of the alien students snickered. A large Krex named Scar turned in his seat. Speak up, human. We can't hear your squeaking. Lisa's eyes met his for just a moment, then she looked down at her tablet again. She didn't say anything else. Pathetic, muttered Zix, a muscular gray-skinned cadet from Gorlak. Why do they even let weak species join the academy? Jake Sullivan, Lisa's human roommate, started to stand up. Hey, that's not... It's okay, Jake, Lisa whispered, putting a gentle hand on his arm. Jake sat back down, but his face was red with anger. After class, the cadets moved through the halls toward their dormitories. Lisa walked quietly behind the others, her soft shoes making no sound on the metal floor. She carried her books close to her chest and kept her head down. I don't understand you, Jake said as they walked. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with short blonde hair and an easy smile. Why don't you fight back? You're smart. I've seen your test scores. Fighting isn't always the answer, Lisa replied softly. But they walk all over you. Even Commander Thrak barely notices you exist. Commander Thrak was the Academy's head combat instructor. He came from Ursus Prime, and he looked like a giant bear that could walk on two legs. His species were known as apex predators in their part of the galaxy. Most cadets were terrified of him. Maybe that's not a bad thing, Lisa said. They reached their room, which was small but comfortable. Jake threw himself onto his bed and pulled out his homework tablet. Lisa sat at the small desk by the window and opened her own work. For the next hour, Jake struggled with tactical problems while Lisa worked silently. Every few minutes he would grunt in frustration or mutter under his breath. Lisa never made a sound. Okay, I give up, Jake finally said. This battle scenario makes no sense. How are you supposed to win when the enemy has twice as many ships? Lisa glanced over at his screen. You're thinking about it wrong. What do you mean? You don't have to destroy all their ships, you just have to make them think you can. Jake stared at her. That's actually brilliant. How did you figure that out so fast? Lisa shrugged and went back to her own work. Later that evening, the cadets gathered in the recreation area. Most species stuck to their own kind, but there was some mixing. The humans usually sat together at one table. The Kreks dominated the gaming area, and the Zephyrians clustered around the music system. Lisa found a quiet corner and pulled out a book. It was an old paper book, not a digital tablet. Jake had never seen anyone read paper books except her. What are you reading? Asked Amy Foster, another human cadet. She had red hair and freckles, and she was one of the few people who ever tried to talk to Lisa. History, Lisa replied without looking up. What kind of history? Human colonial wars. Amy sat down across from her. That's pretty heavy reading. Why not something fun? Lisa's eyes flicked up for just a moment. I find it interesting. The fighting, the violence, the strategies. How small groups survived against larger forces. Before Amy could ask more questions, a commotion broke out near the gaming area. Scar and two other Kreks had cornered a small bird-like cadet from Avios. The little alien was trembling as the reptilian bullies loomed over him. Give us your credits, flightless, Scar hissed, or we'll pluck your feathers. Most of the other cadets looked away or found reasons to be somewhere else. Jake started to get up, but Amy grabbed his arm. Don't. They'll just target you next. Lisa closed her book and stood up. She walked slowly across the room toward the confrontation. Her footsteps were completely silent. "Hey," she said quietly. Scar turned around, surprised. "What do you want, Whisper Girl?" "Leave him alone." The Krex laughed, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Or what? You'll ask us nicely to stop?" Lisa didn't answer. She just looked at Scar with calm, dark eyes. Something about her gaze made the big reptile hesitate for just a moment. "Come on," one of the other Krex said. "Let's go, this is boring." They walked away, still laughing. The small Avios cadet chirped his thanks to Lisa before flying away on his small wings. "That was stupid," Jake whispered when Lisa returned to their table. "What if they had attacked you?" "They wouldn't," Lisa said simply. "How do you know?" Lisa picked up her book again. "Bullies don't like targets that don't show fear. But you could have been hurt." Lisa's fingers traced the edge of her book. "There are worse things than being hurt, Jake." Something in her voice made him look at her more carefully. For just a moment, he thought he saw something else in her quiet roommate's eyes. Something that reminded him of the old vids he'd seen of Earth's ancient predators. But when he blinked, it was gone. And Lisa was just the quiet girl who whispered her answers in class. That night, as Jake snored softly in his bed, Lisa sat by the window looking out at the stars. Her reflection in the glass was small and unremarkable. Just another human cadet in a galaxy full of stronger, faster, more dangerous species. But if someone had been watching very carefully, they might have noticed that her reflection never blinked. And her eyes moved constantly, tracking every shadow, every movement in the corridor outside their room. Lisa Martinez was always watching, always listening, always learning, and in the depths of space, that was the most dangerous thing of all. The combat simulation room buzzed with nervous energy. 20 cadets stood in full battle gear, their weapons powered down but ready. The holographic battlefield around them showed a rocky canyon with multiple levels and hiding spots. "Your mission is simple," announced Commander Thrak, his massive form towering over the students. "Squad Alpha will defend the outpost. Squad Beta will attack and try to capture it. You have 1 hour." Lisa found herself assigned to Squad Beta along with Jake, 2 Krex cadets, a Zephyrian, and a nervous Vrak named Click. Their leader was Zix, the gray-skinned bully from Gorlak who never missed a chance to remind everyone how weak humans were. "Okay. Listen up," Zix growled, his yellow eyes scanning the group. "We go in fast and hard, overwhelm them with superior firepower." The Krex nodded eagerly, hefting their plasma rifles. The Zephyrian's crystalline body chimed in agreement. "What about reconnaissance?" Jake asked. "Shouldn't we scout their positions first?" "Scouting is for cowards," Zix snarled. "My people have conquered 12 star systems. We know about warfare." Lisa stood quietly at the back of the group, her small weapon held loosely in her hands. She appeared to be staring at the ground, but her eyes were actually tracking every detail of the terrain around them. "Martinez," Zix said suddenly, "you stay here and guard our rear. The real fighters will handle the attack." Lisa nodded silently. The simulation began with a blare of noise. Squad Alpha had fortified themselves well in the mock outpost, with overlapping fields of fire and good cover. Zix led his team in a direct frontal assault, exactly as he'd planned. Within minutes, the attack had fallen apart. The Krex charged, straight into a crossfire and were eliminated by stun rounds. The Zephyrian tried to use his natural camouflage but moved too slowly. Click panicked and ran in circles before being tagged out. Jake found himself pinned down behind a boulder with simulated plasma fire sizzling over his head. "This isn't working," he shouted into his communicator. "Keep fighting," Zix roared back, though he was also trapped behind cover. "Wait," came Lisa's soft voice over the comm. Jake almost didn't hear it over the battle noise. "What?" he whispered. 3 o'clock, sniper nest. He reloads every 8 shots. Jake peeked around his boulder. Sure enough, there was a muzzle flash. From the rocks to his right, he started counting shots. "How did you—" he began. "Flanking route behind you." Lisa continued quietly. "Low crawl 30 meters, then climb. Window of 12 seconds when the patrol turns around." Jake looked back and saw the route she meant. It was barely visible, a shadow between 2 rock formations. "Are you sure?" "Trust me," Jake waited for the patrol to turn, then scrambled through the narrow passage. It led him right behind the sniper position. He eliminated 2 defenders before they knew he was there. "Nice work, Sullivan," Commander Thrack's voice came over the comm. "Keep moving." But it wasn't Jake who was directing the attack now. Lisa's whispered instructions guided each member of the team with surgical precision. She told Zix exactly when to move to avoid the automated turrets. She warned Click about tripwires before he could step on them. She even helped the eliminated. Krex rejoined the fight by showing them a hidden respawn point that most cadets never found. 23 minutes into the simulation, Squad Beta had captured the outpost without losing a single member. "Impossible," muttered one of the defending cadets. "We had perfect positioning." Commander Thrack studied the replay data with interest. According to the computer, the winning tactics had come from Cadet Sullivan, but something about the humans' movement patterns seemed off. After the simulation, Captain Rodriguez pulled Jake aside. Rodriguez was the human instructor, a weathered woman with graying hair and sharp eyes. "Interesting tactics out there, Sullivan," she said. "Thank you, ma'am. Where did you learn to read battlefield patterns like that?" Jake shifted uncomfortably. "I just noticed things. Things like sniper reload cycles and patrol timing. That's graduate-level tactical awareness." Jake didn't know what to say. He couldn't exactly tell her that all the ideas had come from his quiet roommate. Meanwhile, strange incidents were happening around the academy. Cadet Scar found his locker jammed 3 days in a row. When he finally got it open, his training gear had been rearranged in ways that made no sense. Zix discovered that his combat boots had been tied together every morning for a week, though security cameras showed no one entering his room. The bullying incidents began to decrease. Not because anyone made grand speeches or official complaints, but because the bullies kept having small accidents, equipment malfunctions, slippery floors, doors that wouldn't open when they tried to corner weaker students. Lisa continued to sit quietly in classes, speaking only when directly asked questions. But Captain Rodriguez started paying attention to her written work. Her tactical assessments were flawless. Her strategic thinking was 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Her understanding of enemy psychology was almost frightening in its accuracy. "Have you considered advanced placement?" Rodriguez asked Lisa after class one day. "I'm comfortable where I am," Lisa replied softly. "Your test scores suggest you could skip directly to officer training." Lisa's dark eyes met the captain's. "I still have things to learn here." Rodriguez felt a strange chill. There was something in the girl's gaze that reminded her of her old combat instructor back on Earth. A man who had fought in the colonial border wars and never talked about what he'd seen. That evening, Lisa sat in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The area was usually crowded, but tonight it was empty except for her. She had a way of finding empty spaces. Jake found her there an hour later. "Hey, can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Those tactics today in the simulation, those were your ideas, weren't they?" Lisa didn't answer for a long moment. Then she nodded slightly. "Why didn't you take credit?" "Credit isn't important. But you made us all look good. You could have been squad leader." Lisa turned to look at him. In the starlight, her face looked older than her 19 years. "Leaders get watched, Jake. They get studied. They get targeted. Is that why you stay quiet? To avoid attention?" "Sometimes. The most dangerous thing in the room is the one nobody notices." Jake thought about that. "Where did you learn to think like that?" Lisa was quiet for so long that Jake thought she wasn't going to answer. Finally, she spoke. "My home colony was attacked when I was 16. Raiders from outside the galaxy. They killed everyone they could find." Jake's blood went cold. "Lisa, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I survived because I was small, because I could hide, because I learned to watch and wait and think instead of fighting." "How long were you alone?" 3 years. Until the rescue ship found me." Jake stared at her. 3 years alone on a hostile world, surrounded by the ruins of her home. No wonder she was quiet. No wonder she understood tactics so well. That's why you read about colonial wars, he said. I read about survival, Lisa corrected, about what works when everything else fails. They sat in silence for a while, watching. The stars turned slowly overhead. Jake realized he had never really seen his roommate before. He'd thought she was just shy and weak. Now he was beginning to understand that Lisa Martinez wasn't weak at all. She was something else entirely. The training moon Sigma 7 was not a pleasant place. Its surface was covered in sharp rocks, poisonous plants, and creatures that would gladly eat unwary cadets. Artificial storms swept across the landscape every few hours, bringing lightning and winds that could knock a person off their feet. This is a survival exercise, Commander Thrak announced as the transport ship prepared to land. You will be dropped in teams of 6. Your goal is to reach the extraction point 40 kilometers away within 72 hours. Lisa's team included Jake, Amy Foster, 2 Kreks named Hiss and Snap, and a massive Ursine cadet called Bear. Bear was actually smaller than Commander Thrak, but he still stood nearly 3 meters tall and had claws that could cut through metal. Storm hit 20 minutes after they landed. The wind howled across the rocky terrain, carrying stinging sand and debris. Lightning cracked overhead and the rain came down in sheets that made it impossible to see more than a few meters ahead. "We need shelter!" roared Bear over the noise of the storm. "There!" Hiss pointed toward a cluster of rocks that might provide some protection. The team huddled together in the small cave they found, waiting for the storm to pass. Their electronic equipment sparked and died in the electromagnetic chaos. Their communicators were useless. Even their GPS locators had gone. "Dark, great," muttered Snap. "How are we supposed to find the extraction point without navigation?" "We follow the landmarks," Amy said, pulling out a physical map. "Old-fashioned way. If we can see them through the storms," Jake added. Lisa sat quietly in the corner of the cave, apparently studying her boots. But her eyes were actually tracking every detail of their surroundings. She had already memorized the map, calculated their position based on the terrain they'd crossed, and identified 3 possible routes to the extraction point. When the storm finally passed, the team emerged to find that the landscape looked completely different. The wind had moved rocks and sand around, creating new formations and hiding old ones. Worse, they could see another storm building on the horizon. "Which way do we go?" asked Amy. Bear stood up to his full height and sniffed the air. His species had excellent senses, and he was their best hope for navigation. "That direction," he said, pointing toward a distant ridge. "I can smell water. There should be a stream that runs toward the extraction zone." The team set off across the broken ground. Bear led the way, using his natural strength to clear paths through the rocky debris. The 2 Kreks flanked him, their scales protecting them from the sharp stones. Amy and Jake followed, trying to keep up with the faster aliens. Lisa brought up the rear, moving quietly and carefully. To the others, she looked like she was struggling to keep pace. In reality, she was watching everything around them with the focused attention of a hunter. That's how she spotted the first stalker. The creatures were native to Sigma 7, about the size of large dogs but with 6 legs and teeth like broken glass. They hunted in packs and were smart enough to follow prey for hours before attacking. Lisa counted at least 4 of them moving through the rocks parallel to their path. She didn't say anything yet. No point in causing panic when the stalkers were still just watching. 3 hours later, as the second storm began to build, Bear stopped abruptly. "I've lost the scent," he admitted. "The wind keeps changing direction." The team looked around nervously. They were in the middle of a valley filled with sharp stone pillars that stretched up toward the gray sky. There was no obvious shelter, and the storm clouds were getting darker. "We're lost," Snap said, his voice tight with worry. "No, we're not," Lisa said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. It was the first time she'd spoken since they'd left the cave. "What do you mean?" Amy asked. "We need to go up." Lisa pointed toward the tallest rock formation. "From high ground we can see the path. That's a 50-meter climb." Hiss objected. "The storm will hit before we reach the top." "Not if we hurry." Bear studied the rock face. It's possible, but dangerous. More dangerous than being caught in the open when the storm hits, Lisa replied. Something in her tone made the others look at her more carefully. She sounded different, more certain, more commanding. They began to climb. Lisa moved up the rock face like she'd been born to it. Her small size was actually an advantage here, allowing her to find handholds that the larger aliens couldn't use. She tested each grip carefully, then whispered directions to the others. Jake, there's a ledge 2 meters to your left. Amy, don't put your weight on that outcrop, it's loose. Halfway up, the stalkers made their move. The pack had grown to 8 creatures, and they came rushing out of hiding with howls that echoed off the stone pillars. They couldn't climb as well as the cadets, but they didn't need to. They just had to wait at the bottom until their prey came down. We're trapped, Bear growled, looking down at the circling predators. No, Lisa said calmly. Keep climbing, but they'll be waiting when we come down. They won't be there long. The others didn't understand what she meant, but they kept climbing. Lisa had a way of inspiring confidence even when she spoke in whispers. At the top of the formation, they could see for kilometers in every direction. The extraction point was visible in the distance, marked by a tall beacon tower, but between them and safety lay a maze of canyons and ridges that would take hours to navigate. There, Lisa pointed toward a narrow canyon that seemed to lead directly toward the beacon. That's our route. How do you know? Hiss asked. Water always finds the easiest path. See how the rock is worn smooth? That canyon floods during the storm season. It will take us exactly where we need to go. The storm broke just as they started back down the cliff. Rain lashed at them, and lightning turned the world white and black. The stalkers had taken shelter under rock overhangs, waiting for the weather to pass. That's when Lisa made her move. While the others huddled against the storm, she slipped away into the darkness. None of them saw her go. One moment she was there, the next she had vanished, like a ghost. 15 minutes later, she reappeared just as silently. The path is clear, she announced. Jake looked down toward where the stalkers had been waiting. The creatures were gone. All of them. What happened to? They decided to hunt elsewhere, Lisa said simply. Jake studied her face in the lightning flashes. Her clothes were wet from the rain, but there was something else. Something dark on her hands that the water was washing away. Lisa, what did you? We should move now, she interrupted. The storm will provide cover. They made their way down the cliff and into the canyon Lisa had chosen. She was right about the path. The smooth stone showed where countless storms had carved the easiest route through the landscape. Even in the darkness and rain, they could follow the natural channel toward their destination. Behind them, Commander Thrak was leading the rescue operation. His team had sophisticated tracking equipment that could follow the biosignatures of all the cadet teams. Most groups were making good progress despite the storms, but one team's readings were puzzling him. According to his instruments, Lisa Martinez's team was moving through the most dangerous part of the terrain with impossible efficiency. They were traveling faster than should be possible in storm conditions, and their path was so direct it looked like they had professional guidance. More disturbing was what his sensors weren't picking up. The area around their route should have been full of native wildlife. Sigma 7's ecosystem was dense with creatures that thrived during storm season. Instead, his readings showed empty wilderness. As if everything alive was avoiding the path the human cadets were taking. Commander Thrak's species were apex predators. They ruled their homeworld through strength and ferocity. But as he studied the tracking data, he felt something he hadn't experienced since he was a cub. A chill of recognition. The kind his ancestors felt when they encountered something higher on the food chain. "Sir?" asked his aide, a young ursine named Claw. "Is there a problem?" Commander Thrak stared at the display showing Lisa Martinez's biosignature. Such a small, quiet creature. Barely worth noticing among all the larger, stronger aliens at the Academy. So why did every instinct he possessed tell him that she was the most dangerous thing on this moon? "Continue monitoring," he growled, "and send a priority Message to Captain Rodriguez, tell her we need to talk. In the canyon below, Lisa led her team through the storm-swept darkness with the sure steps of someone who had learned to survive in places where civilization had failed. The others followed her without question now, trusting in her quiet confidence. They had no idea they were following a predator home. The cruise ship Constellation was the pride of the Academy fleet. 2 kilometers long and filled with the latest technology, it served as both a training vessel and a symbol of galactic cooperation. Representatives from dozens of worlds had helped design and build it. Lisa stood at one of the observation windows watching stars slide past as the ship traveled through hyperspace. Around her, 300 cadets from the Academy enjoyed what was supposed to be their final training cruise. Before graduation, beautiful, isn't it? Amy Foster joined her at the window. Hard to believe anything bad could happen out here. Lisa nodded but didn't speak. Something had been bothering her for the past hour, though she couldn't identify what it was. The ship felt wrong somehow. Too quiet in some places, too noisy in others. "Attention all cadets," came the voice of Captain Martinez over the intercom. The man shared Lisa's last name, but they weren't related. He was a career naval officer with 30 years of experience. "Please report to your assigned stations for today's emergency drill." The cadets began moving through the corridors toward their designated positions. Lisa was assigned to Damage Control Team 7, along with Jake, Amy, and several alien students. Their station was deep in the ship's engineering section. They were halfway there when the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a few seconds later, bathing everything in red light. But in those few seconds of darkness, Lisa heard something that made her blood run cold. Footsteps. Too many of them, moving with military precision through corridors where no one should be walking. "That wasn't part of the drill," Jake whispered. "No," Lisa agreed quietly. "It wasn't." The ship's intercom crackled to life, but it wasn't Captain Martinez's voice anymore. "Attention passengers and crew of the Constellation," said a harsh, unfamiliar voice. "This vessel is now under our control. Remain calm and you will not be harmed." Screams echoed through the corridors, the sound of running feet mixed with shouts in a dozen different languages. Some of the alien cadets made noises Lisa had never heard before, sounds of pure terror. "Pirates," Amy breathed. Jake pulled out his training communicator, but it was dead. They must have jammed all our equipment. Around them, the other cadets were panicking. A Zephyrian was making crystal chimes of distress. 2 Vrak were clicking their mandibles so fast it sounded like machine gun fire. Even the normally arrogant Krex looked terrified. "What do we do?" asked Click, the nervous Vrak who had been in Lisa's simulation team. Everyone looked at each other helplessly. They were just students. They had training weapons that barely worked and no real combat experience. Everyone except Lisa. She stood perfectly still in the red-lit corridor, her head tilted slightly as if listening to something only she could hear. Her dark eyes moved, constantly, tracking shadows and calculating distances. "Lisa?" Jake whispered. She held up one finger for silence. Then she motioned for everyone to follow her deeper into the engineering section. "We should go back," protested one of the Kreks. "Find the others." "The others are either captured or dead," Lisa said quietly. "We need to reach secondary communications." "How do you know there is a secondary communications station?" "Because I read the ship's blueprints." Lisa's voice was calm and matter-of-fact. "I read all of them." They moved through the maintenance corridors like ghosts. Lisa led the way, somehow knowing exactly where to step to avoid making noise. She had them remove their shoes and anything that might clatter. She showed them how to move close to the walls where the deck plates were most secure. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of the takeover. Shouting, weapons fire, the heavy footsteps of armed invaders moving through the ship. But Lisa's route kept them away from all of it. "How did pirates get aboard?" Amy whispered as they crept through a ventilation shaft. "Inside help," Lisa replied without hesitation. "Someone disabled the security sensors. Someone jammed our communications. Someone gave them the ship's access codes." "Who?" "Doesn't matter. Right now. What matters is that they don't know this ship as well as they think they do." They reached the secondary communication station, hidden deep in the engineering section behind multiple blast doors. Lisa's fingers flew over the control panel with practiced efficiency. "I'm getting something," she whispered. "Weak signal, but it's getting through." The message she sent was brief and coded, using an old colonial military cipher that most people had forgotten. But Captain Rodriguez would recognize it. So would a few other instructors who had military backgrounds. "Now what?" Jake asked. "Now we make them wish they had stayed home." The change in Lisa's voice made everyone look at her. She sounded different, older, harder, like someone who had seen things that cadets shouldn't know about. "We're just students," protested Click. "We can't fight real pirates." Lisa's eyes met his across the dim control room. "You're right. You can't." She moved to a wall panel and opened it, revealing an emergency equipment locker. Inside were tools, medical supplies, and something that made the others gasp: military-grade weapons. Real ones, not training equipment. "Those aren't supposed to be there," Amy said. "Emergency protocols," Lisa replied, checking the power cells on a compact rifle. "Hidden weapons caches throughout the ship. Most people don't know about them." "How do you—" "I know because I helped write some of those protocols." Lisa's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried absolute authority. "Colonial Defense Force, Special Operations Division, before I came to the academy." The others stared at her in shock. Lisa Martinez, the quiet girl who never raised her voice, had been a Special Forces soldier. "You're just 19, Jake said weakly. "I've been 19 for a long time," Lisa replied. She handed weapons to Amy and Jake, then looked at the alien students. "The rest of you can help by staying quiet and doing exactly what I tell you." "What's the plan?" Amy asked, hefting the unfamiliar rifle. Lisa was quiet for a moment, listening to sounds from the upper decks. Explosions, screaming, the distinctive whine of energy weapons. The pirates were meeting more resistance than they'd expected from the ship's crew. "The plan is simple," she said finally. "We turn this ship into a trap." Over the next hour, Lisa's whispered commands transformed the terrified students into an effective resistance cell. She sent Click and the other non-combatants to seal blast doors and reroute power systems. She had Jake plant improvised explosives in key corridors. She positioned Amy at a sniper's nest overlooking the main cargo bay, all according to a strategy that seemed to exist fully formed in Lisa's mind. "How do you know so much about ship-to-ship combat?" Jake asked as he crawled through another maintenance tunnel. "Colony ships get attacked," Lisa replied. "The ones that survive learn to fight back." "But you're so quiet. I never would have guessed you were military." Lisa was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer than ever. "The loudest person in a fight is usually the first one to die, Jake. Real soldiers learn to be ghosts." They could hear the pirates moving through the upper levels now, searching for the crew and cadets they hadn't captured in the initial assault. Heavy boots and harsh voices calling out in languages Lisa recognized from the Outer Rim territories. "Ma'am," came Amy's voice over their jury-rigged communicator. "I count at least 30 hostiles. They're armed with military hardware, some kind of powered armor." Lisa absorbed this information without emotion. "Copy. Maintain position and wait for my signal." "What signal?" Jake asked. Lisa smiled, and for the first time since he'd known her, Jake saw something in her expression that made him glad she was on his side. "You'll know it when you hear it." In the ship's main corridor, the pirate captain was growing frustrated. This should have been a simple operation. Board the training vessel, secure the valuable cadets for ransom, and disappear back into the Outer Rim. Easy money. Instead, his men were reporting equipment failures, sealed blast doors, and an increasing number of his soldiers who simply went silent while on patrol. The captain was a massive creature from the carnivore systems with scarred hide and weapons that had seen decades of use. His name was Bloodfang, and his reputation had spread across 3 sectors. He had fought naval marines, colonial militias, and corporate security forces. He had never lost a battle. But as he stood in the red-lit corridor of the Constellation, surrounded by his remaining fighters, Bloodfang felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Unease. Something was hunting his hunters. Something that moved through the ship like it owned every corridor, every vent, every shadow. Something that knew exactly how to turn a passenger vessel into a killing ground. "Sir," one of his lieutenants reported, "we've lost contact with teams 3 and 7. Equipment failure?" "No, sir, they were talking and then..." Silence. Bloodfang's species had ruled their homeworld by being the apex predators of their ecosystem. His instincts had kept him alive through countless battles. Those same instincts were now screaming at him that he was no longer the predator on this ship. He was the prey. And somewhere in the darkness of the constellation, something small and quiet was coming for him. The engineering section of the constellation had become a maze of shadows and silence. Lisa moved through the maintenance corridors like water flowing downhill, following paths that seemed to exist in her mind before her feet found them. Behind her, Jake and Amy tried to keep up, but she was always 3 steps ahead. "Contact," Amy whispered into her communicator from her sniper position. 4 pirates, main junction. They looked nervous. "They should be," Lisa replied softly. Through the ship's internal sensors, she had been tracking the pirates' movements for the past hour. Their formation was breaking down. Professional soldiers would have maintained discipline and communication. These pirates were raiders, used to quick strikes against helpless targets. They weren't prepared for a ship that fought back intelligently. "Jake, are the charges in position?" she asked. "Ready to blow on your signal, but Lisa, this still seems crazy. There are 30 of them and 3 of us." "Numbers don't win fights," Lisa said quietly. "Preparation does." She paused at an access panel and connected her stolen communicator to the ship's internal systems. Her fingers moved across the display with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. "Amy, I'm about to cut power to sections 7 through 12. When the lights go out, take your shots." "Copy that." Lisa initiated the power shutdown. Emergency lighting failed throughout the main corridors, plunging the pirates into complete darkness. In the black void, Amy's rifle spoke 3 times with precise, measured shots. 3 down, she reported. The 4th ran. "Let him run," Lisa replied. "Fear spreads faster than fire." In the ship's command center, Captain Bloodfang stared at his tactical display with growing anger. More red dots were disappearing from his screen. His boarding party of 30 experienced raiders had been reduced to 22 in less than 2 hours, and he still didn't know what was killing his men. "Sir," reported his communications officer, a thin reptilian with nervous eyes. "Lieutenant, Scar found something you need to see." The display screen flickered to life, showing grainy security footage from one of the ship's cargo bays. The timestamp showed it was from 20 minutes ago. In the video, 3 of Bloodfang's soldiers were moving through the darkened bay, their weapons raised and ready. They moved professionally, covering each other's blind spots and communicating with hand signals. Then something moved in the shadows behind them. The camera angle was wrong to show details, but Bloodfang could see a small figure detaching itself from the darkness. It moved with liquid grace, making no sound as it approached the rearmost pirate. What happened next lasted less than 3 seconds. The figure seemed to flow around the pirate like smoke. There was a brief struggle, then the soldier simply collapsed. His 2 companions never even turned around. The figure melted back into the shadows and vanished. "Replay that," Bloodfang ordered. They watched it again, and again. Each time it was the same impossible sequence. A person appearing from nowhere, striking with surgical precision, and disappearing without a trace. "Enhanced zoom on the figure," Bloodfang commanded. The computer processed the image, trying to extract more detail from the poor lighting and camera angle. When the result appeared on screen, Bloodfang's scarred features twisted into a snarl of disbelief. The killer was human. Small, slight, and female. Probably one of the Academy cadets they had come to capture. "This is impossible," hissed the communications officer. "Humans are weak. They have no natural weapons, no armor, no enhanced senses." Bloodfang stared at the frozen image on the screen. In his species' history, they had encountered many dangerous predators. Some were larger and stronger, others were faster or more poisonous. But the most dangerous predators were always the ones you didn't see coming. "Get me a full bioscan of this ship," he ordered. "I want to know exactly how many humans are aboard and where they are." "Sir, our sensors are being jammed by the ship's own systems. Someone has taken control of their electronic warfare suite." "Then we do this the old way. Sweep every corridor, every room, every closet. Find these humans and bring them to me alive." "All of them, sir?" Bloodfang's eyes never left the screen. "Start with the female. She's the dangerous one." 3 decks below, Lisa was setting the next phase of her plan in motion. She had Jake and Amy repositioned at key choke points while she worked her way toward the ship's central core. The pirates were adapting to her tactics, moving in larger groups and avoiding the corridors where their comrades had disappeared. Time to change the rules again. "Danny Walsh," she whispered into her communicator. "Lisa? Thank God you're alive. I've been hiding in the computer lab since the attack started." Danny was a thin, nervous cadet who spent most of his time working with the ship's electronic systems. He wasn't a fighter, but he understood computers better than most of the instructors. "I need you to access the Colonial Military Database," Lisa said. "Look up the service record for Lisa Martinez, Colonial Defense Force." "But that's you. Why would you want me to?" Danny stopped talking as his screen filled with classified files. After a moment of stunned silence, he whispered, "Oh my God." "Read it to the others. Jake, Amy, Click, everyone who's helping us. They need to know who they're working with." Danny's voice was shaky as he began reading from the official records. "Lisa Martinez, age 16 at time of enlistment, Colonial Defense Force, Special Operations Division, assigned to deep reconnaissance and asymmetric warfare operations in the Outer Rim territories." Jake's voice came over the communicator from his position. 16? Lisa, you were just a kid." "I was the only survivor of Colony Hadley's Hope," Lisa replied matter-of-factly. "The military found me 3 years later. They were impressed that I had stayed alive on a world full of things that wanted to eat me." Danny continued reading. "First assignment, Operation Silent Night, infiltration and neutralization of pirate base on Kepler 190. Mission status, success. Enemy casualties, 47. Friendly casualties, 0. Amy's sharp intake of breath was audible over the comm. 47. "That was my first week," Lisa said quietly. "I got better after that." The service record painted a picture that none of them could have imagined. Lisa Martinez wasn't just a former soldier. She was a specialist in exactly the kind of warfare they were fighting now. Small unit tactics, psychological operations, turning enemy strengths into weaknesses. She had spent 3 years in the Outer Rim, fighting pirates, raiders, and things that didn't have names. Her missions were classified, but the results spoke for themselves. Every operation successful, every enemy force neutralized, every objective achieved. Final assignment, Danny read in a whisper. Operation Cleaning House. Elimination of the Bloodfang Syndicate. Mission status. He stopped reading. "What does it say?" Jake asked. "Mission status. Incomplete. Target escaped capture. Agent Martinez reassigned to non-combat duties pending psychological evaluation." Lisa's voice was barely audible when she responded. "Bloodfang is here. On this ship. I can hear his voice over their communications." "You know this pirate captain?" Amy asked. "He killed my family. He destroyed my colony. And 3 years ago I almost had him." The communicator went silent for a long moment. When Lisa spoke again, her voice carried a cold certainty that made them all shiver. "But I have him now." In the command center, Captain Bloodfang was receiving reports from his remaining soldiers. They had found evidence of the human girl's passage, disabled security cameras, booby traps, and the bodies of his men arranged in positions that were clearly meant to be found. She was playing games with him, psychological warfare designed to break his troops' morale and make them afraid of shadows. The problem was that it was working. "Sir," called one of his officers. "Incoming transmission, it's from inside the ship." "Put it through." The main screen flickered, then displayed a small human female sitting in what looked like the ship's computer core. She had dark hair and darker eyes, and when she smiled, Bloodfang felt his blood turn to ice. "Hello, Captain," she said in a voice that was barely above a whisper. "My name is Lisa Martinez. I believe you remember Colony Hadley's Hope." Bloodfang's claws extended involuntarily. The human child who had escaped him 3 years ago, the one who had cost him half his fleet and most of his reputation. "Impossible," he snarled. "You're just a cadet, a student." Lisa's smile widened slightly. "I'm a lot of things, Captain, but right now I'm the person who's going to finish what we started." "You think you can threaten me, little human? I have 20 soldiers left. You have what, 2 friends with stolen weapons?" "I don't need 20 soldiers," Lisa replied softly. "I just need to be me." She leaned forward slightly, and her eyes seemed to look directly through the camera into Bloodfang's soul. "You should have stayed in the outer rim, Captain. This ship is mine now, and so are you." The transmission ended, leaving Bloodfang staring at a blank screen. Around him, his officers shifted nervously. They had heard the stories about Hadley's Hope, about the human child who had killed an entire pirate crew with nothing but traps and patience. But those were just stories, weren't they? In the depths of the constellation, Lisa Martinez finished her preparations and began to move toward the command center. The hunt was almost over. The corridors of the constellation had become a hunting ground, and Lisa Martinez moved through them like she owned every shadow. Behind her, the sounds of battle echoed through the ship as Jake and Amy executed the final phase of her plan. Explosions rocked the lower decks as her carefully placed charges cut off the pirates' escape routes. Captain Bloodfang's remaining soldiers were trapped, and they knew it. Lisa reached the blast door leading to the command center and paused. Through the ship's internal sensors, she could see 21 life signs huddled together in the control room. They were scared, angry, and desperate. That made them dangerous, but also predictable. She opened a comm channel to her team. "Jake, Amy, pull back to safe positions. This is my fight now." "Lisa, you can't take on 20 pirates by yourself," Jake protested. "I'm not taking on 20 pirates," Lisa replied quietly. "I'm finishing a conversation that started 3 years ago." She sealed the blast doors behind her, cutting off any possibility of retreat. Then she walked calmly to the command center's main entrance and pressed the door chime. Inside the command center, the pirates whirled toward the sound. Captain Bloodfang's scarred face twisted into a snarl as he realized what was happening. "She's here," he growled to his men. "The human is here." He activated the door's intercom system. "What do you want, little girl?" Lisa's voice came through clearly, still barely above a whisper. "I want to come in and talk. So you can set more traps? Kill more of my soldiers?" "Your soldiers are still alive, Captain. The ones who surrendered to my friends. The ones who were smart enough to realize this fight was over." Bloodfang checked his tactical display. She was right. Half of his remaining force had simply stopped fighting. They had laid down their weapons and waited to be captured rather than continue hunting shadows that killed without mercy. "I'm coming in now," Lisa announced. "The door is sealed. Reinforced. Battle steel. You'll never—" The door exploded inward, not from external charges or heavy weapons, from something small and precise that had been placed against the locking mechanism. The blast was perfectly calculated to destroy the door without injuring anyone inside. Through the smoke and debris walked Lisa Martinez. She was smaller than most of the pirates remembered, slighter, more fragile-looking. She carried a single weapon, a standard academy training pistol that shouldn't have been able to harm anyone. But when she smiled at Captain Bloodfang, every survival instinct his species possessed screamed warnings. "Hello again," she said softly. Bloodfang's officers raised their weapons, but he held up a clawed hand to stop them. Something in the human's posture told him that 20 guns pointed at her didn't make her any less dangerous. "You've grown up," he rumbled. "Not by choice. I remember you now. The little survivor hiding in the ruins of your colony." You watched from the shadows while I killed your parents." Lisa's expression didn't change. "I remember too. You left me alive because you thought I was harmless. Children make poor slaves, but you weren't harmless, were you?" "No, I wasn't." Bloodfang studied her carefully. 3 years ago, she had been a terrified teenager hiding in the wreckage of her home. Now she stood in his command center surrounded by his soldiers, and she looked comfortable. "How many of my crews did you kill after Hadley's Hope?" he asked. "All of them eventually. 47 pirates at Firebase Delta, 31 at the Kepler Station raid, 62 aboard the cargo hauler Nevermore." Her voice remained calm and factual. "You were always one step ahead of me. Until now." "And now?" Lisa looked around the command center, taking in the positions of his soldiers, the layout of the equipment, the exits and blind spots. Her dark eyes missed nothing. "Now you're on my ship, Captain, and I've had 3 years to get better at this." One of Bloodfang's officers, a nervous reptilian with twitchy trigger reflexes, couldn't take the tension anymore. He raised his rifle and fired. Lisa moved. She didn't dive for cover or charge forward. She simply wasn't there anymore when the energy bolt arrived. The shot passed through empty air and burned a hole in the wall behind where she had been standing. The pirate blinked in confusion, trying to track where his target had gone. Lisa reappeared behind him. Her training pistol, modified with parts from the ship's engineering section, fired once. The stun bolt dropped the reptilian instantly. 19, she said quietly, then vanished again. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. Lisa moved through the command center like smoke, appearing just long enough to disable another pirate before melting back into shadows that shouldn't have existed in the well-lit room. She used the pirates' own equipment against them, turning their tactical positions into traps. A Krellian warrior tried to corner her near the navigation console. Lisa redirected his charge into a bank of electrical panels that stunned him unconscious. 2. Fourth-hand soldiers attempted to flank her from opposite sides. She triggered an emergency hull seal that dropped blast barriers between them, then picked them off one at a time through maintenance hatches they never saw her access. Each takedown was quick, precise, and non-lethal. Lisa could have killed them, all in the first 30 seconds, but she wanted Captain Bloodfang to understand exactly what she was capable of. 15, 14, 13. Within 5 minutes, only Bloodfang and 2 of his most loyal officers remained conscious. They stood back to back in the center of the command center, weapons raised, turning in slow circles as they tried to track a target that refused to stay visible. "This is impossible," one of them whispered. "She's just one human." "No," Bloodfang said slowly. "She's not." Lisa stepped out of the shadows near the captain's chair. She moved with the fluid grace of something that had been born to hunt, not the awkward stumbling of a typical human. Her dark eyes held depths that spoke of things, seen and done in places where civilization had no meaning. "What are you?" Bloodfang asked. "I'm what happens when you kill everything a human loves," Lisa replied softly. "I'm what crawls out of the wreckage when you think you've won. You're just a child. I stopped being a child the day you destroyed my home." She raised her modified pistol, not pointing it at anyone in particular. "I became something else. Something you should have made sure to kill when you had the chance." Bloodfang's remaining officers looked between their captain and the small human who had just dismantled their entire crew without breaking a sweat. The math was simple and terrifying. They laid down their weapons. "Smart choice," Lisa acknowledged. Then she looked directly at Captain Bloodfang. "Your turn." "I don't surrender to prey species." Lisa's smile was soft and sad and absolutely merciless. "I'm not prey, Captain. I never was. You just didn't recognize what you were looking at." She moved forward slowly, and Bloodfang found himself backing away despite every instinct that told him to attack. His species were apex predators. They feared nothing in the known galaxy. But as he looked into Lisa Martinez's dark eyes, he saw, Something that made his evolutionary memory scream warnings. Something his ancestors might have glimpsed in the shadows of ancient forests. The patient, calculating intelligence of something that killed not from anger or hunger, but from a cold understanding that death was simply another tool to be used. When necessary, humanity's true apex predator, the one that had learned to smile while it hunted. The Colonial Defense Force is 5 minutes out, Lisa said, though none of them had heard any communications. You can surrender now, or you can explain to them why their academy ship is full of dead pirates. Bloodfang's weapon clattered to the floor. Good choice, Lisa whispered. 2 hours later, the command center was full of uniformed officers and academy instructors. Captain Rodriguez stood near the main display, reading reports and trying to piece together what had actually happened aboard. The Constellation. Casualties? She asked Commander Thrak. Minor injuries only. Some of the crew were roughed up during the initial boarding, but nothing serious. And the pirates? 28 captured alive. 3 chose to resist and were stunned unconscious. None killed. Captain Rodriguez looked around the command center, noting the scorch marks and damaged equipment. How many cadets were involved? In the resistance? 4 humans, plus several aliens who provided support. Commander Thrak consulted his tablet. Sullivan, Foster, Walsh, and Martinez. Martinez led the operation? According to all witness reports, yes. Captain Rodriguez found Lisa sitting quietly in the corner of the command center, apparently studying her hands. She looked exactly like what she was supposed to be, a 19-year-old academy cadet who had gotten caught up in circumstances beyond her control. Martinez, Captain Rodriguez called. A word? Lisa stood and walked over, her footsteps making no sound on the metal deck. Hell of a thing you did here, Rodriguez said quietly, taking on an entire pirate crew with training weapons and academy equipment. I had help, ma'am. Jake and Amy were very brave. I'm sure they were. But according to Captain Bloodfang, the real threat was you. Lisa's expression didn't change. Pirates say many things, ma'am. He says you're not really a cadet. Says you're some kind of special forces operative who's been hunting his organization for years. I'm just a student, ma'am. You have my academic records. Rodriguez studied the small, quiet young woman standing before her. Lisa's academy file showed excellent grades, no disciplinary problems, and the kind of unremarkable,